Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gooey's Dungeon Dive, the podcast where I, Gooey, rank all of the dungeons in the Legend of Zelda series. And we are getting close to the end of Link's Awakening, only 2 more dungeons. After leaving Face Shrine, we are met again by the Owl. He tells us, "The many monsters of this island fear that the Windfish is about to awaken. The monster's power is real. They may conquer the island and destroy their foes. That day may come soon. Now, go to the mountain tower. Fly like a bird." If we head back up to the tall mountain range, we can meet him again, actually, and he says, "The going is much more trying from this point. You have only 2 more tasks to accomplish. The first is in the east part of the mountains. The second is in the west. Go. The Windfish grows restless." Unfortunately, we can see both our destination and the key needed to reach it from various points, but there are gaps much too large to cross to reach them. Atop the tall mountain range, there is a man who looks like another Italian plumber, and he seems to have a fondness for chickens, in which he tells us, "Chickens these days don't have the fighting spirit they used to. In the old days, they could fly, flap, flap, but now, see, cluck, cluck." And so, a little hint there, with the level 2 power bracelets, we can find underneath the weathercock in Mabe Village the grave of a flying rooster. Using the Frog's Song of the Soul, which is a brand new pop #1 single that we learned from who seemed to be Wart from Super Mario Bros. 2. We were able to resurrect the rooster, and he seems pretty friendly. If we take him back up to our Luigi lookalike, this guy, he gets surprised and says, "Wow, amazing. The rooster is actually flying. It's just like I said, eh? Have you tried to hold him over your head? Cluck, cluck." Doing so allows us to fly over those gaps and get the bird key and to enter Eagle's Tower. Okay. Wow. Eagle's Tower. This is certainly the most unique dungeon of the game. There's no cute map layout design here. Instead, we have a multi-floor tower. I think it's the only dungeon in the game with multiple floors quite like this. I went a little bit nuts doing all the maps and stuff in the last few dungeons, and they made going through the progression of them, was a test of my sanity, and I think I'm going to save myself the trouble of this. I'm not going to step-by-step walk through the dungeon because it is quite open and quite non-linear, but I'm going to explain kind of the big idea here, of course. This dungeon is quite different. So like I was saying, the main theme of this dungeon doesn't actually revolve around finding locks and keys to open the locks. It instead focuses on these 4 pillars in the dungeon. They're on the 2nd floor, and they're holding up the 4th floor. If you go up to the 3rd floor of the dungeon, there's just large pits that aren't really accessible, but when these 4 pillars are destroyed, the 4th floor will come crashing down into the 3rd floor and make it whole and accessible. To destroy the pillars, we have to carry around this giant ball that can be thrown into them to break them. They can be broken pretty much in any order, but there's definitely a more natural route that a lot of people will take, but even then, it can get a little twisty. Let's just say it's easier said than done, There's a significant rise in the difficulty to knocking each one of them down, depending on the order, of course. Now, the first one is right there, out in the open, waiting to be hit, but then another one is blocked off by these blocks that have to be lowered by crystal switches for us to move past. So you have to, navigate and find a crystal switch and come back and pick up the ball and get into that room. But then there's a 3rd pillar that we can't just simply walk into the room with the ball. We actually have to throw the ball into the room over a barrier that we can't walk past, and then navigate down to the floor below and work our way around. up to the room the ball was in from another direction. And this can be made more confusing because the dungeon has the crystal switches to block paths, has one-way doors, pits that lead down to the floor below. So, just the navigating is simply getting around it's very tricky, especially if you don't know what you're doing, or even if you know what you're doing, So then there's that final pillar, and it requires us to throw the ball over one barrier, navigate around, and throw it over another barrier, make sure we kill all the enemies in that same room, and that makes a chest appear, and we then have to navigate around and bomb 2 walls from above the same room to enter it from a different location, hookshot over to that chest, and then get reunited with the ball. Whew. The music actually in this dungeon, I should say, is kind of pitch perfect for the puzzling mood. We also get the eerie vibes that have kind of been present more so lately, I think. This, I don't know, it really sets a tone. This is one of my favorite dungeon themes in the game. So, I very broadly described how you do this, but I think it can be complicated. You get a very satisfying cutscene too when you knock the pillars down, and I think that's really stand out for this dungeon. That's really cool. There's other things to confuse. I mentioned some, but then there's also optional chests in the dungeon, and it can make it more complicated if you don't know what you're doing, even if the contents of the chest can be useful. There's, your map, your compass, your stone beak. Again, they can be helpful, but if if you have the compass and you're looking around for other chests, thinking, it's kind of almost a red herring, you don't really need a lot of these chests. There's also, Crazy Tracy medicine and even a seashell. I think the last dungeon, we could leave the dungeon and get a seashell. This one has one within the dungeon, which is pretty cool. The dungeon item here, also helpful, but optional, is the mirror shield, and I think again it's appropriate that this doesn't have your typical get the item and then use it thing, because it's really built around the pillar puzzles and navigating that way. I could see how you could implement an item into this, but I think it's appropriate for this dungeon. But the shield can help with some things, like in the final boss, and there's some BMOS here, and I'm pretty sure it can, deflect their lasers, so it still can be useful, don't get me wrong. And for a new player, you need it to get to the next dungeon, though even that's sort of optional if you know what you're doing. Another set of items that can be helpful but optional in this dungeon is actually the small keys, which, in a normal dungeon, they're what you are looking for. But no, not here. There's one early on that you use right away, and that's required. But after that, it's 2 optional keys. One makes a nice little shortcut that can be useful to get over some of the crystal switch blocks. But the other one, I'm not quite sure what this key block does. I don't know. Leave a comment if you know the purpose of this block. I didn't remember it or discover it this time around. It's been a long time since I've really even gone into the room it's in. Alright, quick enemy check here. We got used to all the Mario enemies and Mario characters showing up in the game, but there's a damn Kirby in this dungeon, and he can take quite a beating too. He is very resilient. I guess the designers really understood the power of Kirby. Yeah, quite a guy to see. Otherwise, we kind of got a greatest hits of the regular enemies. We see a Hynix return as the mini-boss, though, and I think he's a little more powerful. He's a different color, and the room he's in has, pits that he can throw you into, and you can fall down to the floor below. And that can really disrupt your exploring if you don't know what you're doing, He's a cool guy. But the real standout mini-boss of this dungeon is the Grim Creeper. He's a skeleton dude, and when you enter his chamber, he gets real ticked. He says, "Hey, runt, you think you can take me? Alright, boys, you get this punk out of my face." Then his fight he uses the flute to summon these bats, and then you just have to beat those guys, and it'll cause him to flee. But before he flees, I think he almost makes a sort of reference to a classic movie a classic Jimmy Cagney movie, maybe. He says, "You dirty rat, you beat my brothers, I'll never forget you." I guess him and the Bats were brothers. I don't know. After this, you get access to the Nightmare Key, and it's somewhat similar to A Link to the Past, where it doesn't actually go right to the Nightmare Chamber. There's just like a small portion of the dungeon before the boss. It's not as expansive, but there's not much you can do here. There is that medicine, the Crazy Tracy medicine, but it's still pretty cool. No shade against it. It's worth noting that a lot of this dungeon can really be done in any order for the most part. It's definitely unlikely, but theoretically possible. I think that you could pretty much get all the way up to the Grim Creeper before doing anything, pretty much. Like, you just need a key and then to work your way up to the 3rd floor, because it's there before you even knock the 4th floor down. But yeah, I don't know, it's just the navigation that's the trick. I really like it. It is really open, and it really can still be confusing despite that. It makes me think, I don't know, it's kind of like a framework, I think, actually, to like what a cool divine beast could be, because like the divine beasts, if you think of the terminals sort of like the pillars, like you can access them in any order, and even in those, the navigation is key, but it's definitely different in this, because you have like the crystal switches that can only be accessed in certain areas, as opposed to like a divine beast where you can kind of alter the dungeon at any point. But regardless, this is kind of a tangent here. I just love the openness to this, but while still being so puzzling. Even knowing what I'm doing, it's like I gotta really focus if I wanna get through it efficiently. The nightmare of this dungeon, it doesn't even reside within a nightmare chamber. No, it's actually a battle that takes outdoors and atop Eagle's Tower, which is very fitting with the theme. On top of the tower, we meet the Grim Creeper again, and he exclaims, "Bah, I'm not gonna hold back. I'm gonna make you wish you were never born." He then summons the final boss as he leaps atop the evil eagle, which is a great name. It's a giant, imposing bird, and the fight is pretty neat. It's actually from like a side view, which I sort of guessed the angler fish fight was, but this is a little bit harder. This guy, he flies around, he tries to peck at us and blow us off the side of the tower. In the original, if he knocked you off the side of the tower, it would mean having to like kind of restart the battle, and that was really annoying. And in this, you just like hit some spikes, take some damage, and come back up. It's a welcome change. It makes the fight pretty easy, actually, especially if you have a lot of hearts, But I don't know. I think this is a pretty neat fight. It's pretty memorable. This dungeon has a lot of memorable moments, even outside of the puzzling aspect with the cutscene and the. You kind of have similar to Master Stalfos, like a reoccurring mini boss. In general, this game has a lot of great character to some of these bosses. It's very minor stuff, but I like how they all kind of like smack talk you and things like that. So yeah, good fight. When he's defeated, the Grim Creeper gives us his final refrain. He says, "My energy, gone. I lost, but you will be lost too if the windfish wakes. Same as me. You are in his dream." Yikes. With that, we can make our way back inside and get the organ of evening calm. And we're teleported into that white light, and we hear Ocarina. The music of the Ocarina leads. Ooh, only one more dungeon left. I was thinking about this all day. I was at work today, and I was thinking about this, because I played the dungeon the other day, and I was like, where am I going to rank it? and it was hard, honestly. But for me, it was really a question of the number 1 or number 2 spot. So let's go through it. At number 1 right now, I have Ganon's Tower. I think it's the staple final dungeon of the series. I don't even know if a dungeon will contest that in that regard. So we'll see. But like right away, like Eagle's Tower to me just felt like this whole game actually was like kind of solidifying like a sort of formula almost in the series. But this Eagle's Tower really to me hinted at like the potential of future Zelda dungeons, of not just being, I mean, it's already gone beyond that, of just being a set of rooms with locks and keys, don't get me wrong, and they've done a great job of that so far. These top whatever dungeons here I think are some of the best dungeons in the whole series, but this really moves the ball forward of being not just the lock and key type thing, but the whole dungeon being this puzzle that you have to solve. We've seen elements of it already in other dungeons. I think of like, I don't know, I even think of it in like Skull Woods, of going in and out of the overworld, kind of gives it a unique feel. But this is on a whole nother level. I love the openness of it. I love the complexity. I honestly, I'm just gonna put it at number 1. Not even. I was more agonizing about this today, but for me, it's really strong. I really like it. I'm sure there's gonna be other dungeons. I don't know. Like when I think of Ganon's Tower and final dungeons, I'm like, I don't know who can beat this. But when I think of Eagle's Tower, I'm like, I think this concept might have been done better later. I guess we'll see. How they build off of it. But for now, maybe I'll change things around later. I don't know if that's allowed. Is that allowed? Can I move dungeons? Can I move dungeons that I've already placed, or is that cheating? I don't know. But for now, I'm going to keep Eagle's Tower at number 1. I love it. I do love it. And I love this game, and we're almost to the end of the game. The next episode is going to be our last one, so expect another big blowout. It's obviously going to be the season finale, so things are going to be a little bit different than the other episodes. We're going to probably recap some of the game or whatever and talk about it as a whole, but we'll also be ranking Turtle Rock. So I'm really looking forward to it. We'll see how that stacks up to Ganon's Tower in terms of final bosses, huh? So with that, thanks everyone for watching. Thanks everyone who've been there's been a lot of great people talking about the difference, like some of the more minute, or even some of the more standout differences between the two versions of the game. And I think some of them make a big difference, but if I forget to talk about them or whatever, it's because I didn't think to. These videos are already pretty long, so I'm not going to talk about every single room, hopefully, in the dungeon, but I really appreciate the people commenting that stuff and kind of talking about it very politely. We've got, like, sometimes I worry about the people with more knowledge than me being kind of elitist or whatever, but that's not really been the case. Everyone's been very polite and cool, and I really like the vibe of the comments. So anyway, thanks to all of you who've been watching. Good vibes all around, and we'll see you for Turtle Rock.